So again, I am so very excited to present Lauren Rogers, Community Initiatives Manager for San Diego Humane Society. Lauren brings to us today more than 13 years of experience in animal welfare and a focus on community programming that keeps pets with their families. Through her extensive work with underserved populations and human services organizations, Lauren really is a champion for equity and resource accessibility. We're so excited to have her here today. So, Lauren, please take it away.
Thank you so much, Danielle, and thank you everyone for joining today. I'm gonna go ahead and slide over to the next slide. Okay, and thank you for the introduction. I also wanted to introduce my dog, Rowan. He's sitting right next to me right now. Um, a little bit about me. I was born and raised in the San Francisco Bay Area, but I've lived in San Diego for almost 20 years now, so I definitely call it home. And as Danielle mentioned, I started in the animal welfare space in 2012, and my career focus has been on community programming to support pets and their people. And currently at San Diego Humane Society, I manage a few of our intake diversion programs, including our safety net foster, supported self-rehoming, and case management efforts, although I have held a few different roles here. And Today I'll be discussing ways that animal shelters can support people in crisis in their communities, specifically people experiencing domestic violence or housing insecurity. I'll share some of San Diego Humane Society's community programs and services, as well as our partnerships with human service organizations and some ideas for groups who are looking to partner in that capacity. Starting with a bit about San Diego Humane Society. So we were founded in 1880. We're an open admission shelter with animal services contracts for 13 cities in the county, and that's including the city of San Diego. We have 5 campuses and care for more than 40,000 animals annually. But we are definitely more than a shelter. We do more than take in and adopt out animals. We offer a lot of community support and programs to keep pets with their families. To get a feel for the landscape of San Diego County, for anyone who's not familiar, we're a very spread out county at 4,500 square miles. We have a population of 3.3 million people, with about 1.4 million people living in the city of San Diego. We're a border city and a military city with a very high cost of living, especially when it comes to housing. So we're definitely paying that sunshine tax over here. And because of that, we do have a relatively high population of people experiencing homelessness, about 10,000 people across the county on a given night, according to our last point in time count. And to get a feel for the pet policies in our shelters, the city of San Diego contracted homeless shelters are pet friendly. But for cities who aren't, or for shelters that aren't contracted with the city or that are located within other cities within the county, the policies do vary, with some accepting only assistance animals and some accepting both assistance and companion animals. And same with our domestic violence shelter pet policy, it's on a spectrum from not accepting any animals at all to just assistance animals to all pets. So I thought I'd start with some of our more large-scale programs that are aimed at making pet ownership more accessible. And then I'll get into some of the more specialized programs, resources, and partnerships that we have to support people in crisis. And so starting with our behavior and training support, we offer group classes that cover topics ranging from basic obedience to more specialized classes for dogs and cats. Our Pet Training Assistance Fund is a grant program that will cover the cost of group classes for pet families who would like to attend but are experiencing financial hardship. We also offer private consultations for a fee, And then we have libraries of free articles and YouTube videos covering common behavior topics. Our community pet pantry offers free supplemental food and supplies at our campuses, and we also have a couple of community distributions. The pantry is for anyone in need, and in addition to food, we give out items like leashes, collars, harnesses, toys, treats, really whatever we get donated, we will supply. Our community veterinary program is a lower cost clinic at our San Diego campus. And we offer currently preventive and basic sick care, although we are starting to offer surgeries and dentals, which is super exciting. And in the next couple of years, we are going to open a brick and mortar state-of-the-art hospital for that program too. As far as spay and neuter, we offer reduced cost options at our campuses. We also offer free spay and neuter for community cats. We offer low cost vaccinations and microchipping at our campuses. And then our supported self-rehoming program offers resources and support for pet owners who are facing the decision to rehome their pets so that they can do that outside of the shelter and rehome the pet directly into a new loving home. As far as temporary boarding, we have a couple of different programs. Our emergency boarding program is typically for cases involving law enforcement. So this will be situations where a pet owner is incarcerated, if they have an emergency hospitalization where they're taken away by ambulance, if they're experiencing a domestic violence situation, an eviction, or a pet owner passes away. The pet will be brought to San Diego Humane Society and held for 5 days while we try to make contact with the pet owner or next of kin to pick that pet up. And if the pet owner is unable to reclaim the pet, we'll move forward with processing them after that emergency boarding hold. But for pet families who require a bit longer term support, which would certainly be in cases where people are in crisis, we offer free foster care for up to 90 days. And like I said, this is for situations where people are in crisis or transition, and then also experiencing financial hardship and unable to pay for private boarding. And I've outlined our reasons for Safety Net Foster Program enrollment here. So you'll see that housing insecurity accounts for about 2/3 of our overall cases, with hospitalization, domestic violence, substance abuse treatment following that. And I did want to mention that prior to us launching this program in 2021, another local shelter had already had a very successful long-term foster program that supports survivors of domestic violence. So we really wanted to kind of fill that service gap that exists for pet owners who needed that time to get back on their feet, but weren't necessarily in a domestic violence situation. And the program's been really successful. We have an over 83% reunification rate. I listed some of our safety net foster program criteria here. However, I'm going to go ahead and skip through, but if anyone has any questions about the program, I am happy to take them. And then for people who are in need of extra support to either keep or rehome their pet, they can be connected with our case management team, which is myself and one other staff member, via phone or email. And we're really there to provide that personalized one-on-one support. So we'll help with things like resource navigation, so navigating San Diego Humane Society's community programs and services, maybe reaching out to the various departments that we offer to try and connect people to services. And then we'll also help them navigate alternate pet resources, so outside of our shelter, and even human services. We also help with finding pet-friendly housing or shelter. We'll do some light behavioral counseling for common behavior topics like trying to think, maybe resource guarding or reactivity, or maybe the person feels like their pet is just really bored at home and maybe acting out as a result. Those are all conversations that we're comfortable having. And then, of course, we'll refer to our behavior and training team for more in-depth conversations and support. We'll also offer guidance on emotional support animals and rehoming tips and assistance with writing pet biographies to really increase pets' chances of being adopted outside of the shelter if that's something that the owner has decided on. And during these interactions, we really try to ask a lot of questions. So we're leading with curiosity and focusing on deep listening to try to understand what the owner is wanting as the intended outcome for their pet. We certainly don't want to go down a direction that they're not interested in, but we also want to balance that with making sure that they know what resources are available to them. And once the conversation is concluded, we'll almost always follow up with email or text with the resources that we've discussed so that they have something to refer back to and that they have a way to get back in contact with us. We really do encourage them to reach back out to let us know how things are going, and especially if the resources that we sent aren't working out. Okay, so next I'm going to dive into ecosystem mapping and building partnerships. But before I do, does anyone have any questions about the programs we've gone over so far? I'll just sit for a couple seconds. Okay. Um, so it's no secret that animal shelters are typically working with limited resources, right? And realistically, we won't be able to service all of the pet-related needs for our community. But on top of that, realistically, most people probably won't ever interact with an animal shelter. So that whole model of being a one-stop shop for pet needs doesn't really make sense. And I think that animal shelters sometimes get overwhelmed with starting supportive programming for that reason. We feel like if we do one thing, we need to start doing everything. So, say we start a pet food pantry and we're giving out food and supplies, and then at our pantry, someone mentions that they could really use help with vaccines. And so we're like, oh, okay, maybe we'll start doing vaccines. And then when we're doing vaccines, someone mentions, hey, I really need to get my dog in for an exam. And so we're like, oh, well, maybe we should start a veterinary clinic, and just so on and so on, right? Um, and it's not to say that we shouldn't provide all of those services. It's great if we can, but we definitely don't have to. And I think even shelters the size of San Diego Humane Society have constraints. There are things that we would love to do that we just can't do. And that's true of shelters at every scale to varying degrees. So we really need to branch out if we want to be effective and meet the goals and objectives that we have set out to do, which is helping people and animals. And that's where ecosystem mapping comes in, and can be especially helpful because knowing what resources exist in the community can help to guide our programming, our potential partnerships, and even our case management efforts. So, for those who aren't familiar, ecosystem mapping is the creation of spreadsheets and or visual maps detailing all of the community providers relevant to a project in a service area. And ecosystem mapping can help to identify external human and pet support services, which will really be the tools in our tool belt for case management. And just as an example, the first animal welfare job that I had was at a teeny tiny nonprofit called Paws San Diego. And we provided primarily support for pet owners who were homebound. So we had a food delivery program, we provided some funding for vet care, support with dog walking, but we had this like shoestring budget, and there was just so much that we couldn't do, but that was being asked of us. So we what we were really good at was creating a list of all of the available pet services in San Diego and then sharing those resources out to people when they asked. So I think that's just a really solid example of like, we're never going to be able to do everything, but at least we have something to be able to offer people. Ecosystem mapping is also a great way to identify potential human and pet partnerships and service gaps, whether the service gaps are actual and that the service just doesn't exist in your region, geographic in that the service does exist, but maybe people aren't able to get there, or maybe it's knowledge based. So the service does exist, but people just don't know about it, so it's really not serving them. And I think a good practice is to start with pet services. So, starting with gathering all of the low cost options in your area, low, no cost, easy to access options. And so, we might be looking for, low or no cost vaccines, boarding options, temporary pet care options. And then once we have all of that down, we can expand to looking into human services as we feel is appropriate to our specific community. So, we're in San Diego. This is a huge metropolitan area. There's a ton of providers and services that are available. So it doesn't really make sense for us to try and gather a whole list of resources for all of the providers in the area when we could just refer to a group like 211 who is much more equipped to provide that information. So we have definitely outlined pet-friendly homeless shelters and safe parking lots and that sort of thing, but that's about as far as we go. I've seen organizations that have resource lists for pet food pantries, transportation, medical care. So I really just think it depends on what makes sense for you and your region. And this might seem really straightforward, but talking to people, the community is such a great resource to know what resources exist for them and then where support is lacking. Recently I updated our low cost dental care list and I ended up doing some research on Facebook and Nextdoor and just pulled up different threads by searching dog dental care or whatever. And I was able to find several options that I had never heard of before. So, in addition to talking people in person, obviously, it's a good idea to go on those kind of public forums. And then if you're thinking, I don't have time to be scrolling Facebook and looking at, what people are posting, I totally get you. I think using students and volunteers who maybe do have the time and are in need of community service hours can be a really good option to pulling those resources together. And then once you have the resources together, make sure to post them on your website. That way, community members, staff, volunteers all have access to them. So I've included a quick screenshot video of our website just so you can have an example for how things are laid out. So you'll see on here there's tiles for a lot of the services that we're talking about today. We really wanted to gather everything in one place and make it easy for people to navigate. I clicked on our pet inclusive housing support page and just a couple examples of the links that we have on here. So this is our assistance animals and housing page. It goes over fair housing laws, requesting a reasonable accommodation for your pet in housing, reasons that a reasonable accommodation could be denied, and then we even have a sample ESA verification letter on there. Our list of pet-friendly housing in San Diego is broken up by region and it's searchable by zip code. And on this page, we have all of the properties' contact information, including their website, and then we have their pet policy. And we've also made an effort to try and highlight the properties that are breed and weight inclusive for dogs and affordable for low-income renters. And we did not, it goes without saying, but we did not develop all of these resources overnight. This stuff takes time, and I think just starting small with maybe your low-cost veterinary care list is a good place, and then branching out from there. A couple of other pages that I wanted to highlight. So our domestic violence support page lists our programs and services first. Then we have some veterinary care resources on here, pet boarding resources, and then we end with human service resources. So these will be things like our resources, our resource centers and shelters and safe parking lots that accept pets. And then one more page that I wanted to highlight was our homeless support guide. So similar concept. It outlines our programs and services, veterinary care resources, boarding options, and then getting into housing and temporary shelter options. So that's just a sample of how we've laid things out. And in addition to having the resources on our website, we also have flyers for pretty much everything. So all of our low-cost veterinary care options, all of our temporary boarding options, we have a flyer for. And we're able to take these to our outreach events. We're able to have them at the front desks at our campuses, and we're able to share them with our partners so that they have something tangible to share with their clients. So the first page that I have on here is our pet support for owners experiencing domestic violence. And this page lists the domestic violence hotline. It also lists temporary pet care options. And we made sure to note to keep their safety as top priority when they're considering these resources, especially when it comes to posting in public places like Nextdoor or Facebook. Our pet resource guide for families experiencing homelessness is mostly focused on pet resources as well. And I will say we tend to use that one most when we're at events that are with homeless service providers. So they're focusing more on the human resources, and we just make sure to have the pet info. And then lastly, this is an example of one of our flyers in Spanish. It is for low-cost pet boarding and foster care options. And we do make sure that all of our resource sheets are translated into English and Spanish, typically double-sided. So just a few samples there. We have a whole library of these. And then moving into partnerships. So I will say that because of our position in the community now, we're often contacted by groups who are wanting to partner. But there are certainly times when we might be proactively reaching out to a group that we're wanting to partner with. And in those cases, we might need to create some buy-in as far as serving the pets who are attached to people. So I've listed some talking points here. The first one is just sharing the significance of the human-animal bond, especially for people in crisis. We know that if somebody is experiencing homelessness or going through a domestic violence situation, their pet is so much more than a companion. They're often that source of unconditional love and support. And I think being able to share examples of that bond in action is so impactful. So situations where maybe someone was offered shelter, but they denied the opportunity because their pet couldn't come. Or maybe someone is staying in an unsafe situation because they're worried about their pet. Or maybe even a child who is living in a household that's going through domestic violence, and their pet is like their one confidant that they're able to talk to. So along those lines, really thinking of pets as part of the family and an extension of the person. And when we can show that we are looking out for what the person really cares about, I think that's just such a good way to build trust and rapport with a client. It's trauma-informed care, so keeping families together encourages trust and choice. We're not separating them and inflicting further harm, and instead we're promoting healing. And then lastly, just a kind of boost that human services are doing the hard work of supporting people in crisis. And relatively speaking, pets are the easy part of that equation. And that's where they can lean on their animal welfare partners for support. And if we're initially receiving a lack of a response or maybe some hesitation, that doesn't mean that the group hates animals and, doesn't advocate for their well-being. Although some people could, not love animals or be fearful of them, and that's okay. I think it just means that oftentimes, these organizations are busy, they have a lot on their plate, and it's important for us to just be patient and be available for when the time comes to partner. And then once a relationship has been established, we can maybe start the conversation about any obstacles to incorporating pets into their programming. And then we're really brainstorming and working through solutions together. So, say we're working with a homeless shelter and um, they're not wanting to accept companion animals. They already accept assistance animals, but they don't want to accept companion animals. And maybe the concern is like, we'll just get a flood of companion animals, right? So a suggestion could be maybe connecting them with another shelter who has implemented that policy so that they can talk through how it's worked out for them. Or maybe it's saying, okay, well, what if we give it a try? And then if you do get this, flood of companion animals, we can reconsider the policy. So things like that, or like working through maybe potential conflict between animals or conflict between people. Maybe there's some safety training that we can provide to try and mitigate that. And then lastly, I put consider an MOU. Even though our partnerships are pretty informal, I do think MOUs can be impactful in terms of establishing that framework and expectations for the partnership. But where do we find these partners? So we already discussed ecosystem mapping as being a good place to start. But I also think that attending the same events and meetings as other service providers is a wonderful way to go about making that connection. So I'm thinking examples like health and resource fairs. We attend, our district attorney puts on a monthly homeless court event where people experiencing homelessness will have the opportunity to take care of some of their minor tickets or infractions. And at those events, there'll be a lot of other service providers. So there'll be homeless shelter representation, there'll be substance use representation, other medical resources. And then San Diego Humane Society is there to share about the services that we offer. And I will say that whenever we're there, we get like, it's so nice to connect with the people, of course, but the service providers get so excited to see animals represented, and they're always coming over and sharing cards and asking questions. So we've made so many partners that way. Food bank distributions, pretty straightforward. So if there's a human food distribution, maybe we're setting up a pet food table next to them and talking to people that way. Community-based events, especially in communities that we might not normally engage with, can be really impactful, especially in terms of maybe meeting some of those more grassroots service providers. And then lastly, monthly case manager and provider meetings. I'm thinking like virtual in-service type meetings where there's usually a presenter and maybe a case management team who is learning about the presenter. I've done a lot of those, and I also make an effort to attend our monthly Bridge to Housing Committee meeting. That's where our North County San Diego homeless service providers meet once a month, and they will share out shelter bed openings. They'll share about any changes in their programming, and then there'll usually be a speaker or two to share about the work that they're doing and the referral process. So these events and meetings are just a great opportunity to not only connect with community members who you're wanting to serve, but also case managers who you can then share about the programs that you offer and maybe talk about partnering. So training is another great way to connect with partners. Um, we've certainly offered a lot of training to our human service partners as far as pet behavior. So going over body language, safety, working with shy and fearful or reactive pets. And really, this is just a way, I think, to help people feel more confident and comfortable about having animals in their space. It's just giving them those tools so they feel more empowered. We've done pet care essentials talks, so we're things where we're going over diet, grooming, preventive care, heat safety, that sort of thing. We've done talks about assistance animals in shelter and housing. We've definitely brought programming to, or we've talked about programming um, at different presentations that we've done. And during those talks, we also make sure to highlight other pet resources that are available in the community. We've done training on best practices for working with the Partners Focus population. So we've received training for working with people in domestic violence situations or people experiencing homelessness, and vice versa. We've trained on safety with animals. And then we've learned about their offerings and the referral process. And we always try and be mindful about sharing out funding opportunities for human service organizations that are wanting to incorporate pets into their programming. A few years ago, the state of California offered the Pet Assistance and Support Grant, which offered that very kind of funding. And we made sure to share that with all of our partners. And several actually did end up receiving the grant funds to have for their pet programs. So that was really impactful. And then on the topic of programming, um, we can offer to bring our animal shelter programming to a partner facility. So I'm thinking if the partner is a homeless service provider or domestic violence provider, depending on obviously safety and rules around that, we might be able to offer a pet food and supply distribution, clinics for vaccinations, microchipping, and spay neuter. We can do behavior and training support for residents. We can bring canine ambassadors, so really friendly dogs to interact with staff or residents of the shelter. We are actually actively doing office hours at Father Joe's Villages, which is one of our largest human shelter providers in San Diego. So one of our staff will set up there once a month and um, connect with residents, talk about their pets, talk about any challenges they're having, and then connect them to resources. She'll also bring supplies and make ID tags. And then we have plans to hopefully start looping in some of our other departments with time. We've also done youth programming at some of the shelters if there are youth staying in shelter, just to talk about humane education, maybe do some pet toy making, things like that. And then other ideas to explore that we haven't personally been able to do yet, but that would be wonderful would be job skills training. So we are maybe hosting shelter residents at San Diego Humane Society so that they get the skills on hands-on working with animals so that they could maybe get a job at our shelter or with a boarding facility or a veterinary office. I think it would also be super valuable to be able to offer pet sitting for those who are staying in a shelter and either looking for employment or at work and really don't have anywhere for their pets to go. Um, I think oftentimes people are relying on other shelter residents to be able to take care of their pets, which, can work out, but it would also be nice to have that support to rely on at the shelter. I've met with shelters who have started contracting a licensed clinician to write ESA letters, since that can sometimes be a barrier to people getting into housing or shelter with their pet. And then lastly, I've heard of shelters that have started hiring on a staff member who's dedicated to supporting pets and all of the needs that come along with them. So those are just a few extra ideas. And then I wanted to end with a few of our successes. So the first one is PATH, People Assisting the Homeless. And they're located throughout the state of California, but we've exclusively worked with the San Diego location, so I can only speak to their policies. But they're wonderful. They accept assistance and companion animals in their shelter and housing programs. They were one of the state funding recipients a few years back, so they're able to support their pet program, which has been really helpful. Um, their staff have attended a Don't Forget the Pets workshop hosted by Red Rover, and also the My Dog is My Home open house that took place in San Diego. We provide food and supplies to their interim housing shelter monthly. We've also participated in various events held at their facilities to support animals. And then, of course, we refer and utilize each other's services for the populations that we're working with. Another partnership success with Legal Aid Society of San Diego. So, Legal Aid Society of San Diego offers free legal support for people in our region. And a few years back, we asked their fair housing team to do a presentation on assistance animals to help educate us as to what the process is. And so they were amazing. They did a Zoom presentation that we were able to record and be able to utilize for future staff that were onboarding. And they talked about, you know, what is considered an assistance animal, requesting a reasonable accommodation, reasons that reasonable accommodations can be denied. And then they even went so far as to create this flyer for us that's double-sided in English and Spanish. And it outlines kind of uh, a snippet of that information, but also has their contact information for people who are in need of support or are having a landlord-tenant issue. Legal Aid Society has a flex funding pool, and so they'll sometimes use that to support families who are facing temporary housing loss with funding for pet boarding. And then they'll also refer clients to our programs and services, including our Safety Net Foster program. And of course, we're constantly referring people over there. And then the last partnership I wanted to highlight is the San Diego Domestic Violence Council. We have been a part of the council for a long time, and basically it's a collection of, gosh, I want to say hundreds of agencies in our region that support people experiencing domestic violence. And as a result of being a part of the council, recently we were granted the opportunity to be able to make referrals for emergency domestic violence shelter. So there's an online form that we can fill out if we're working with someone who is in need of that kind of support. And once we submit the request, it will ping all of the shelters in the area, and they can get back to us and let us know if they have an opening for that person. And if they do, we can provide that warm handoff to the survivor and follow up to see how it went and make sure that they were able to get into shelter with their pet, hopefully. We also have attended training through the council. So some of our staff have completed domestic violence essentials training. We've trained them on our programs and services, and a lot of our local domestic violence shelters attended the two Don't Forget the Pets workshops that were hosted here. We've also participated in Domestic Violence Awareness Month. We've brought cute, friendly dogs to attend Domestic Violence Awareness Month, kind of relax and refresh events so that their shelter staff can get that emotional support from animals. And then we attend the monthly Shelter and Supportive Services Committee meeting, and we've done programming at some of the domestic violence shelters too. So lots of options there. I just wanted to go over those to give a few ideas as to what partnership can look like, because I don't know, I'll speak for myself. When I was initially thinking about partnering with human service organizations, I thought it had to be this really formal kind of MOU outlining all of the expectations. And I think it can be that way and it can be successful, but it also can just be this kind of long-term thing where we're leaning on each other and offering support when it comes up. So that will do it for me. I listed my contact information here, and I encourage you to reach out if there's any other information I can provide. Hopefully, you're able to take away some ideas for serving people and pets in crisis. I will say that, it really just takes one person, whether that's the person at a potential partner organization who loves animals and wants to do something to help, or maybe it's someone that you're helping at your animal shelter, who's looking for emergency shelter to go to with their pet, and you kind of take that on as your task. But that's just kind of the impetus for how these programs start oftentimes, and that's really all it takes. So hopefully you took away some ideas today, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Lauren. That was fantastic. I kept taking notes down as we were going of just wonderful program ideas to pass
Yeah.
along to some of our animal shelter partners. Just so, so fantastic. And I see some comments coming in via the chat. Eliana says, so informative. Thank you.
Mm.
I know we did have some questions that came in through the chat as you were presenting.
Okay.
So we'll go ahead and start with those. And then if anyone else would like to either enter a question into the chat for me to read out, or as soon as we get through kind of our backlog of questions, if you'd like to unmute and ask Lauren your question directly, you are welcome to do that as well. So for starters, let's take a look. We had a couple of great questions from Bob when you were talking about ecosystem mapping. I think the first question is, do you use an eco map template? So I think what he's getting at there is there some sort of like template or program that you specifically use when you're eco mapping or that you would recommend?
Good question. I would recommend Haas, Human Animal Support Services, I believe has a really good toolkit for ecosystem mapping, and they might have more specifics around where to get that process started. I tend to just kind of do like a Google Map search and I'm saving locations and, creating categories from there. But we've also had so many of our resource guides in place for so long that we've just been able to build off of the information that we have. Um, so yeah, but I would recommend checking out that Haas toolkit, and maybe if we send out this recording, we can also link that. I don't know if that would be an option, but yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, we love Haas, and they also have some great presentations that they host as well. So definitely recommend checking them out if you haven't already. Another question from Bob: what do you recommend for a county that has resources, but they are siloed? They're
Mhm.
not coordinated, and they have a history with each other, so they don't necessarily grasp collaboration easily.
Maybe an event, maybe an outreach event where we're getting everyone together in one place, serving the community. Maybe that could be a good option. And then just interacting with people face to face could be a good starting point. Um, Scheduling a meeting could be a good option. Inviting providers for a tour of your facility, if that's appropriate, could be a good way to break the ice. Asking them to do an in-service at your organization could be a good option. I think there's lots of ways to kind of broach that, but I love the events that we go to where we're all just together, we're all serving who we want to serve, and it's just nice to see representation from so many different sectors and agencies.
Awesome. Thanks, Lauren.
Mm.
Question from Julia that I'm going to let you field, Lauren, even though I think I could answer it. When you were talking about all of the incredible resources and resource lists that San Diego Humane provides, Julia wanted to know, is there a national resource website, some sort of website or source that compiles all of these resources across the country?
That's such a good question. I want to say, is it's either pets.findhelp.com or Pet Finder. One of the two is at least working to get to that. It's obviously a huge task to take on, so it will take time, but I believe it's pets.findhelp.com that's trying to get all of that information in one place.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that sounds right. And Julia, there are some attempts for like national resource lists in different sectors. So, for example, domesticshelters.org, they have an online tool that allows you to search by city or zip code to find domestic violence shelters near you. And they have collaborated with us at Red Rover to include in each of those shelter listings whether or not that shelter has pet options. But even in something that's so specific, they're just looking at DV shelters. Even then, we see that lots of shelters sometimes are omitted or their information is old or incorrect. So that's why I think that an undertaking that talks about every sort of resource that's available to people and to pets is definitely a challenging endeavor. But there are some out there that sort of hone in on one specific area and try to create a national database.
Yeah, I think it'd be cool if you could just like, if anybody could kind of like upload to like a community forum almost. But I mean, I guess that'd be hard to kind of keep track of and make sure it's accurate and things. But I think that'd be so neat to just have somewhere that had access, like from a representative from each region of the state or something. But maybe one day.
Right? That would be incredible.
Yeah, I love it. Maybe one day, because it would be just, yeah, so helpful and so beneficial. A question from me, actually, Lauren, regarding your incredible sort of resource lists. I was wondering how often you suggest auditing those resources to ensure that they're current and that they're correct and up to date.
Yeah, I would say ideally every few months. That's always my goal, but it ends up being about twice a year. And the community will let us know. They will let us know when something's not up to date too, which I actually appreciate. But yeah, so I would say twice a year is a good amount of time. And then, I mean, also set yourself up for success. Like instead of providing the most specific link to the page that you're talking about, maybe just provide the general website, because we know that web links can change so often. So, but yeah, twice a year is a good amount.
Awesome. And then Anita just entered in the chat. Do you happen to know of any resource lists available in Canada?
Oh gosh, I wish I did, but I don't. I'm sorry.
No, I think that's okay. Anita, I don't know for sure what exactly they have, but I would recommend checking out Toronto Humane Society and Humane Canada. Those are the two groups that we've interacted with several times via Don't Forget the Pets, and I know that they do have a fair bit of community programming that they offer. So I think it's possible that they might have some resource lists as part of that programming. So I would take a look there to get started. Question from Cole. Is the case management that you provide to clients in the Safety Net Foster program ongoing? Is it over a period of weeks or months? And then how often do case managers meet with the clients?
So I'll answer the second part of the question first. So it's all over the phone. We will make an effort to meet in person when the owner is either dropping off their pet for the program at the shelter or reclaiming their pet. But other than that, most of our interactions will be over the phone, or via text or email. And we are actually checking in with them every week. So we're sharing foster updates and they're sharing how things are going on their end. We're trying to connect them to resources to improve their situation. And then yeah, that goes over the course of 90 days if needed. Our average length of enrollment for the program is about I want to say it's 68 days, but I'd have to double check. 65 days right now.
That's great. Thank you so much for sharing that. And great question, Cole.
Mhm.
Question from Julia. Are there any interns or volunteers that help out with these projects?
At the moment, no. In the past, we have utilized volunteers, especially for updating all of the resource lists that we have. Personally, I found that it ended up being more time intensive to manage the volunteers and their questions than to just go through and update the resources that I'm already pretty familiar with and know how to navigate the websites and where to find the information I'm looking for. But in the past, we certainly have used volunteers and they've been really helpful. But now I think it's just easier for me to kind of pick away at things as I have time versus like dedicating this big chunk of time to coordinating a group of volunteers to be able to do it. And then I can make the updates in real time too, instead of like taking what they've added and, adding it to our website or the sheets or wherever the information's posted.
That's great. Great question, Julia. Those are all of the questions that we have gotten through the chat so far. Does anyone else have any questions that they would either like to enter in the chat or would like to unmute and ask Lauren directly?
Hi, yes, this is Brianna. I work for the North Minneapolis Pet Resource Center. I apologize, I'm in my car, I was curious, and maybe you mentioned this earlier because I did hop on a little late, but when you have those individuals come and drop off their pet for your services and they're staying with you for an extended amount of time, do you have them sign a waiver
Yeah.
saying like, hey, if your pet gets sick in our care, we will pursue, medical treatment, and how do you go about kind of navigating, certain maybe emergencies when the pet is in your care, but their caretaker isn't there, if that makes sense.
Yeah, great question. So the person enrolling in our safety net foster program does maintain ownership of the pet throughout the program enrollment. That was something that I really tried to advocate for because I think it's important for people to be able to build trust with us too. But with that said, we do have an agreement for the program that kind of outlines our veterinary care and authorization, acknowledging that, the pet is entering a shelter system, even if it's for a very short amount of time, because ultimately we'll send them to foster care. So they could be exposed to infectious diseases. And that, of course, we'll do everything that we can to keep them safe, but they are ultimately going to a foster home. And we can't control what happens once they're outside of our shelter. So we do have our agreement, and I'd be happy to share that with you if you would like to read it over and just see what's included.
That would be amazing. Thank you.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Shoot me an email.
Thanks, Brianna. That was a great question. And Lauren, if I could twist your arm a little bit, I bet that form and other forms that you use for some of your programs would be very popular for a lot of our followers and our participants here. So if you wouldn't mind sending them to me, we'd love to add them to our document library, which we
Yeah.
don't forget the pets website, which has, for anyone who hasn't visited that part of our website yet, has a variety of sample documents, including MOUs, sample contracts, sample release forms that shelters use right now throughout the country, and they've sent to us for you all to use as sort of a jumping off point if you are looking to create similar forms yourself. So we would love to add those, Lauren, because I bet that they would be popular.
Yeah, truly happy to share. And just let me know, aside from the agreement, I'm happy to share any of our documents. I know sometimes just getting the paperwork sorted is like the one hurdle that we're not really able to get over. So anything to make it easier for people who are wanting to start these programs.
Absolutely. And I see lots of comments coming through the chat saying, yes, please, that would be so helpful. Would love to see that agreement. So I think, yeah, people would be very happy to see that.
Yeah, and I saw Christina added in the chat too, a shout out for the or a plug for the monthly safety net meeting that we try and attend whenever we can. And that's such a great place to be able to pick people's brains about how they navigate certain situations. So
That's a great one. Thanks for sharing that, Christina. Also good to see you. We love Rough Haven here. Another great question from Julia. Have you ever needed any type of legal aid to address any issues? And what type of relationship do you maintain, if any, with legal entities?
So I'm trying to think how to answer this. Yes, I think that San Diego Humane Society as an organization does have legal counsel for lots of different situations that we encounter. But I'm wondering if this is related specifically to any type of program or support. I think just some clarification around, or if it's related to the types of referrals that we give to people who are in need of legal support. I think I would just need some more info on that.
Sorry, just I guess in relation specifically to uh, for smaller organizations or rescues that may be offering services to, for example, victims of domestic violence. When I guess when you're entering into that partnership with the owner and your organization of your providing these services, like has anything ever come up, or do we typically maintain some type of a relationship with legal aid just in case something were to come up? Just any.
Gotcha. Yeah, so we have our agreement that people sign, which does include a waiver of liability. Luckily, the cases so far, I'm like so nervous to say this, have been few and far between where any kind of potential situation like that might come up. But we do have we have our own legal services that we can use as an organization if needed, but hopefully or luckily that situation has not come up for us yet. And I think I'll definitely send you the agreement because I think that covers a lot of the kind of questions around any potential issues there. And that was obviously reviewed by our legal counsel as well. So yeah, we had to get the okay to move forward with the program, so everyone's on the same page.
Awesome. Thanks, Lauren.
Yeah. But I just really quickly to add to that, I do think that the relationship that you have with the person and building that trust and open communication is so important too, and will take you so far. Just because just like they really need to believe and know that you are on their side and you want what's best for them and their pet, and just having that trust developed. And then on the other side of that is the foster support. So if things do start to go a little wonky with your foster, you can kind of intervene before anything not good happens. So having that open line of communication with them too.
Yeah, perfect segue, Lauren. We had a question from Anita just about whether or not you might have sample interview questions to get the best potential foster volunteers and avoid low return rates from foster or, foster parents feeling overwhelmed by the pets that are in their care. I'd love to just also ask you to maybe expand a little bit more on how you manage your pool of foster volunteers for pets that are needing foster for these special cases.
Yeah.
So it's different. It's different to foster an owned pet that's going to be returning to their owner. And, oftentimes, information about that owner is not going to be shared with the foster parent. And so they may not know where that pet's going after that foster assignment. So I know sometimes those assignments can be challenging. So I'd just love to hear a little bit more about how you all kind of manage your foster volunteers, make sure that they're a good fit, and make sure that they are able to continue volunteering with you.
Yeah, so our foster recruitment process is pretty straightforward. If somebody is interested in becoming a foster, they would first sign up as a volunteer, and then they're asked to select the track that they're interested in fostering for. So whether that's dogs, puppies, cats, kittens, and then obviously our safety net foster program is one of the more specialized programs that they can opt into. So they'll go through a virtual training on how the program works, what the expectations are of them. They'll receive our foster manual. And then once we have a safety net pet that's in need of foster, we can start reaching out depending on where they've indicated their interest lies. As far as maintaining the relationships with the fosters, I will say because they've signed up for that specific track, they have an expectation of what they're signing up for. They know that these are owned pets and that ultimately they won't be available for adoption. And our goal is to return the pet to their person. That's not to say that situations don't come up where people might have questions about the situation that the pet is going back to, but those questions are few and far between. I think more so than you would probably think. And when they do come up, we just address it as like a natural curiosity. And luckily, because our safety net case managers know the person, we're able to advocate on their behalf. We're able to share things like, this pet is loved so deeply. They're a cherished part of a family. This person is doing everything they possibly can to get their pet back, and it is tearing them up to be away from their pet right now. And usually that alleviates concerns that people have. Once again, I do think it's important to keep that open line of communication. So if somebody does have concerns, we're not, pushing them down or not addressing them. I think it's important to talk through it, even if it can be a little uncomfortable sometimes. Because I think when people don't have the full story of the pet that they're helping, which they don't, because we keep everything totally separate between our fosters and owners and try to maintain the person's confidentiality, they might fill in the gaps with some bias. And so it's important to try and kind of mitigate that bias and just talk about it. And then as an organization, we're very fortunate to have a lot of fosters. I think thousands of fosters that are active at this point. That doesn't mean that they're all taking on an assignment at any time, but luckily we've been able to just pick from that pool for our safety net program versus recruiting specifically for this program. I hope that answers the initial question.
That was great. Yeah. Thanks so much, Lauren. And Anita, I think, is also curious if it might be possible to get a copy of she said of the training. I think, Anita, do you mean the training that they give to their foster volunteers? Is that the training that you're referring to?
Yeah, it's just to get an idea of what training process that they go through, not to copy it verbatim, of course, because we're new into this environment and we're just about to launch a program in the fall, which is for senior dogs. So we're doing our own certification, almost like hospice support workers. They're going to be for senior dogs. So it's something that we could just get tips from the training and the process to be able to, adjust it to suit rather than try and reinvent the wheel and start from scratch.
That's amazing. Yeah, I'd be happy to see what I can gather, and then I'll just send everything to Danielle in one message.
Amazing. Thank you. You're an angel.
That sounds great. Thank you for asking that question, Anita, and thanks, Lauren.
Yeah.
Well, I don't see any more questions coming through the chat, and we are a few minutes past our cutoff time of noon. I will do one last call for questions, just in case anyone has a last minute one they want to get under the wire here, and then we'll let Lauren go. But any last questions? Okay, perfect. Well, thank you all so much for joining us today. And thank you so much to Lauren for coming today and for sharing all of the incredible programs that you have at San Diego Humane Society. I learned so much, and so I'm sure that many of us who joined today learned a lot. So thank you so, so much for giving us your time today.
Thank you for having me. And feel free to reach out, truly, if I can offer any other information. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful rest of your day.